Imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, Imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the as yet to undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am once again Robcasting at you in the Robservatory refit, still undergoing construction. We are not ready to launch in 12 hours, no matter what threat is approaching this planet. However, you know what is approaching? Avatar 2, The Way of Water. And of course, we've been talking about it on the John Campy show the last couple weeks since we saw the new trailer at CinemaCon. By the way, we did see it in high frame rate and 3D, and it was pretty spectacular. I mean, it was basically just an announcement trailer. It doesn't tell you anything about the story. But, of course, James Cameron has pioneered underwater motion capture, and the visuals are stunning, albeit a little bit 70s prog rock. But that was what the first movie was like, too. So I am very excited. I really liked the first Avatar. I did. I've told the story many times about how I took my mom to see it, and she'd never seen a movie in 3D IMAX before. My pragmatic, unimaginative mother, who wanted to deal with the here and now and everything in front of you, when it was over, her eyes as big as saucers, she turned and looked at me and said, "How did they do that?" Which was, it was refreshing for me to see that from my mom. So Avatar obviously worked on her. However, since the beginning, 13 years ago, the fan community was bitching about Avatar. And I figured, you know, I've always liked it. I think of it as an astonishing piece of fantasy filmmaking, certainly of world building, albeit, again, it has a very classical structure to it. I mean, you could say it's another white savior story, Rob. Well, that's true, but, you know, there's lots of those in the world. And whether it's Ferngully or Dances with Wolves in Space, I was there for it. I like those stories, you know? I was late to Westerns, but I like Westerns. A lot of those are the same, too. But the filmmaking and the imagination on display was something I loved. And, you know, the nation was swept with Pandora fever when the movie first came out. I remember reading about people wanting to go live there. They were having, like, withdrawals. Very weird. But anyway, I mean, hey, whatever floats your boat, right? So I decided to go back and do a little bit of research, and I figured I would take you with me. And I went back and looked up a few articles about Avatar. And I figured, why not? What is it? Why does fandom not like this movie? You know, I mean, hey, everyone loves Terminator 1 and 2 and Aliens and The Abyss and True Lies, and even Titanic has less of, I mean, you know, I don't hear fanboys, friends of mine, and people saying that Titanic, hate that movie. I mean, I think everyone kind of likes Titanic. It's a romance. And if you think about it, The Abyss, astonishing feat of fantasy filmmaking as well, especially the longer director's cut, is very romantic. The Terminator, Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor, star-crossed lovers maybe. There's an element of romance there, too. True Lies about husband and wife. And Avatar, I think, is also very romantic, which maybe part of that is the reason why fans don't necessarily embrace Avatar the way that they embrace other Cameron movies. But I wanted to go in, and I found this article. This is an an ABC News article from January 17th, 2010. Russians, Avatar backlash builds against film and filmmaker James Cameron. Russians, conservatives, blacks, disabled. Swipe at Avatar and James Cameron. This is from Lucina Fisher, and it was written on January 19th, was published on January 19th, 2010, 12 years ago. When you have the second highest grossing movie of all time, you can expect a few pot shots. These days, folks are standing in line to take a swipe at James Cameron and his movie Avatar. While the film was busy breaking box office records, passing $1 billion in ticket sales worldwide in 17 days, putting it just behind Cameron's other blockbuster Titanic, a backlash aimed at the writer-director and the film has been building. The criticism comes from every corner: conservatives, people of color, paraplegics, and atheists. I don't think it's a need to take the movie down, Greg Kilday, the Hollywood Reporter's film editor, said. At this point, there's not much anybody can do to stop its success. At Sunday's Golden Globes, the film took home two of the biggest prizes, Best Picture and Best Director for Cameron, and it's poised to win big at the Academy Awards in March. Indeed, it's the film's success on which, Kilday says, different interest groups are hoping to capitalize. Avatar is a big mother whale, he said, and a lot of smaller fish are swimming along in its wake, hoping to pick up some of its momentum. Neither Cameron nor Fox, the film's distributor, responded to multiple requests for comment from abcnews.com. Kilday says he believes Cameron is unfazed by all the backtalk. This time around, he has the luxury of perspective, he said. He went through the whole ramp-up to the release of Titanic and people saying it was going to be an enormous flop. He came out on the other side, the most successful commercial film director. The latest complaint lodged against the director is that he ripped off a series of Soviet science fiction novels. A Russian journalist wrote that Cameron copied elements in Avatar from brothers Arkady and Boris Strugatsky's 10-book Noon Universe series. Most notably, the name of the lush green planet where the film takes place, Pandora, is the same name of the utopian setting that the Strugatskys wrote about. By the way, I should just throw out an aside here. I am a fan of Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. Their book Roadside Picnic was the basis for Tarkovsky's film Stalker, and they also wrote a sequel to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds called The Second Invasion from Mars. So I'm very familiar with their work, and I've read some of the Noon Universe. Both Avatar and Noon Universe take place in the 22nd century. Then there's the name of the humanoids inhabiting Pandora. In Avatar, they're the Na'vi. In Noon Universe, the Knave. Cameron steals from the Strugatskys generously, using not only the planet Pandora, which was invented by them, author and journalist Dmitry Bykov wrote in Russia's independent Novaya Gazeta newspaper. The Na'vi are unequivocally reminiscent of the Knave. Cameron denied plagiarizing. Arkady Strugatsky passed away in 1991, but his brother has denied quotes attributed to him, accusing Cameron of stealing ideas from their best-selling books. I did not accuse the creators of the film Avatar of plagiarism, Strugatsky wrote on his website, adding, however, that he has not seen the movie. All he knows, Strugatsky says, is that it involves monsters on Pandora. Cameron denied plagiarizing the books, according to the UK's Telegraph. Nearly every successful movie attracts charges of plagiarism, and 99% of the time, such charges go nowhere, film editor Kilday said. Lately, the filmmaker has also had to defend his film against charges of racism and overt political messaging. The Associated Press reported last week on how hundreds of people have responded to what they see as racist themes in Avatar, accusing the film of being everything from a fantasy about race told from the point of view of white people to the white messiah fable. Robin Lee, a black actress who appeared opposite Will Smith in the film 7 Pounds, likened Avatar to Pocahontas. The Indian woman leads the white man into the wilderness, and he learns the way of the people and becomes the savior, she said. It's really upsetting in many ways. It would be nice if we could save ourselves. Conservative columnist David Brooks wrote in the New York Times, Avatar is a racial fantasy par excellence. It rests on the stereotype of white people that are rationalist and technocratic, while colonial victims are spiritual and athletic. It rests on the assumption that non-whites need the white messiah to lead their crusades. It also creates a sort of two-edged cultural imperialism, he wrote. Natives can either have their history shaped by cruel imperialists or benevolent ones, but either way, they're going to be supporting actors in our journey to self-admiration. Conservatives blast Avatar. Travis Kavula, an African studies scholar, argues that the movie's depiction of the Na'vi as helpless victims gives a false sense that natives are always in harmony with nature. When you have this complete alien species presented as a kind of Hollywood ethics embodiment, I don't find it credible, Kavula said. There's this romantic notion of nature. It's just ridiculous to think that most indigenous people are a kind of hunter-gatherers who don't impact their environment. Cameron strongly denied any racist intent and said in an email to the AP that his film asks us to open our eyes and truly see others, respecting them even though they are different, in the hope that we might find a way to prevent conflict and live more harmoniously in the world. I hardly think that is a racist message. Meanwhile, conservatives are also finding fault with the film. I wasn't infuriated by Avatar. I was infuriated by the way it framed the culture war debate, as if there are no secular people on the right, Jonah Goldberg, editor-at-large of the National Review, said. Another conservative writer called it anti-war. Avatar is a thinly disguised, heavy-handed, and simplistic sci-fi fantasy allegory critical of America from our founding straight through to the Iraq War, conservative movie critic John Nolte wrote. It looks like a big-budget animated film with a garish color palette right off a hippie's tie-dye shirt. John Podhoretz, writing a critique for the Weekly Standard, went so far as to call the movie anti-American. The conclusion does ask the audience to root for the defeat of American soldiers at the hands of an insurgency, he wrote. So it is a deep expression of anti-Americanism. Kind of. Cameron defended the movie's point of view. In an interview with NBC's Today Show, he said, Avatar shows how greed and imperialism tend to destroy the environment. In this case, the pristine environs of Pandora. It's a way of looking back at ourselves from this other world, seeing what we're doing here, he said. Disabled uncomfortable with Avatar. Even viewers who use wheelchairs had something to say about Avatar. Most applauded the film's main character, Jake Sully, a Marine who is injured and becomes paraplegic, but some pointed out inaccuracies between the film and real life. As a person with a spinal cord injury, you kind of notice a few things that are out of whack, says Phil Klebine, a tetraplegic who has paralysis in his arms and legs but is able to use a wheelchair. Many wheelchair users say Sully's legs look skinny and wondered if Cameron had digitally altered them to make them appear atrophied. They also noticed, details others might miss, that Sully didn't have a specialized cushion. Even for people in manual wheelchairs, they use some sort of cushion to prevent pressure sores, Klebine said. Santina Mua, who suffered a spinal cord injury at age 5 in a car accident, said Sully labored too much when he got in and out of his wheelchair. There was one scene when he was doing a transfer and he had to pull his legs over. I thought he struggled too much with the weight of his legs, Mua said. I'm a little girl and he was a big, strong guy. It should take much less effort for him to transfer. So that was one article. And here's another article that I figured I would share and throw into the mix. This article comes from Forbes. And Danny D. Placido wrote this article, and this was published on July 24th, 2020. And I like this article because everyone talks about, well, Rob, they always tell me this, Avatar did not leave a pop culture footprint. No one talks about it. And okay, but here's an article that said the very same thing. Why Avatar really never managed to take root in pop culture. Another day, again, this was written July 24th, 2020, so almost 2 years ago. Another day, another Avatar delay. As the release of Avatar 2 is pushed back another year due to the pandemic to December 16th, 2022, it strikes me that delay announcements are the only thing keeping the memory of Avatar alive, at least for those of us who haven't visited the Avatar-themed section of Disney World. Angie Han says in a tweet, "The next time you feel bad about missing a deadline, just remember Avatar 2 was originally supposed to come out in 2014. Otherwise, the only way Avatar ever gets discussed is regarding its lack of impact on pop culture, which is a pretty unfortunate fate for one of the biggest films of all time. Think pieces from Screen Crush, The Telegraph, and Forbes lament Avatar's failure to inspire a wave of imitators, a dedicated fandom, or even an identity, really. What is Avatar other than that incredibly successful movie that nobody remembers? Why didn't Avatar leave more of a cultural impact on pop culture? The film doesn't have a single iconic scene, referenced and parodied endlessly in other stories. There is no welcome to Pandora moment. Well, there is, but do you even remember it? For the record, I don't think Avatar is a bad movie at all. The story is a tad derivative, sure, and the dialogue is corny, but it's a strong blockbuster that puts many Marvel movies to shame. The characters aren't memorable or complicated, but they act consistently. Much of the backlash was in response to the ridiculous hype that initially surrounded the film, along with the fact that there isn't much to soak in during repeat viewings. Avatar feels emptier with each rewatch. Viewing the film at home in 2D isn't impressive, and while the world of Pandora is lush and pretty, especially if you're a fan of neon lighting, it doesn't really feel lived in. And frankly, there isn't enough lore. Lore is fuel for the dedicated fan base, the people who cosplay, write fiction, and spend endless hours discussing and dreaming about a fictional world. Lore is real estate for the imagination to roam after the end credits roll, and Avatar seems to be keeping the majority of its lore for those long-delayed sequels. The film takes place during a conflict which mirrors the darkest depths of American history, featuring a white savior protagonist who falls in love with a highly romanticized vision of indigenous culture. We're not given much to think about. The Na'vi are too idealized to be interesting. Indeed, the Na'vi could have been formed inside the pungent smoke clouds of Joe Rogan's recording room, a fetishization of tribal life from the perspective of a suburban kid with a taste for psychedelics. If Avatar was released today, it would likely achieve a kind of notoriety on Twitter that, ironically, might have helped the film achieve a pop culture footprint of some sort anyway. The Na'vi are incredibly on the nose, but the real reason their struggle doesn't stick, I think, is because we're only exposed to the conflict between natives and colonizers without any understanding of what life was like before their arrival. This isn't exactly a criticism. There's only so much time for exposition, especially while establishing a weird new world for an international audience. But think of how, for example, Star Wars: A New Hope managed to tease the dense history of its universe without going into details. The lowly status of the two droids tells us something about that world, as does Obi-Wan's offhand mention of the mysterious Clone Wars, as well as the implied conflicts and complications between the varying factions which inhabit the Star Wars universe. Fans watched A New Hope repeatedly, walking out of the theater with more observations and more questions. Of course, Disney and Lucasfilm have been more than happy to answer those questions, sometimes to the detriment of the franchise, but there was an incredible amount of material just waiting to be mined. With Pandora, James Cameron created an entire ecosystem filled with fantastic creatures, but had little to say about the people who inhabit it. Avatar fans didn't have anything of substance to build on. No hint of how Na'vi society functions beyond being the utopian fantasy of those who invest in crystals and dream catchers. The lore just wasn't enough to sustain interest, especially after so many years. That being said, it's likely that the lore is still to come. I'm certain that the Pandora of Avatar 2 will feel less like a screensaver and more like an inhabited world. I think that James Cameron will eventually turn Avatar into a behemothik franchise to rival Star Wars once he has the chance to flesh out the details in those sequels. The first film was practically a tech demo, a self-contained story which served as an introduction to something greater. But then again, who knows? 2022 is a long way away. Perhaps Avatar 2 will seem incredibly underwhelming compared to whatever bizarre events await us in the coming months. In hindsight, the world of Pandora seems relatively uneventful compared to the never-ending chaos of the planet Earth. So, it's interesting to me that our beloved filmmaker James Cameron, who has since the 80s pushed the research and development of new techniques and new technologies to the forefront of Hollywood, creating the pseudopod sequence, the water sequence, the water probe in the abyss. That technology directly led to the T-1000 in Terminator 2, and that technology allowed the dinosaurs to be made for Jurassic Park. Titanic, again, used things like massive software, and he's always been doing things. I mean, him and his brother built submersible and diving equipment to go to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, and he's always done things to push the language of filmmaking. Obviously, he pioneered certain 3D techniques for Avatar, and he created underwater motion capture for Avatar: The Way of Water. So it's not like James Cameron is resting on his laurels, nor has he ever. And what I find so interesting about all of these stories is that they're all talking about the Na'vi and Pandora and white saviors and colonialism and all of that. But what isn't talked about is the actual story of what's going on in Avatar. You have a man who had a twin brother who was crippled during the war and is looking for a place in life. And if you watch the extended version of Avatar, you see a little bit more of his life on Earth, which is relatively miserable. And unfortunately, his brother passes away, and they call upon Jake Sully, because the DNA is the same, to join the Avatar program. Now, this was a very cool science fiction conceit, that these Avatar drivers would have their DNA and the DNA of the alien Na'vi, the indigenous people of Pandora. They would create these clone bodies that then human drivers would be able to get into mentally and use to infiltrate the native population and learn about them. And of course, there was an evil company that was mining unobtainium, which you don't really know what it does, but it's just a mineral that Earth wants and wants to exploit because it's worth so much money. But what was really interesting to me is I was wrapped up in Jake Sully's character and his odyssey and what he was doing. He didn't even necessarily want to do this, but he did it, I guess, in deference to his brother, and also he needed something to do, and maybe he'd be able to get his legs back, or for whatever reason. And I really thought that the story of a stranger in a strange land has always been one that appeals to me. And I think beyond what everybody's looking at as far as these two articles were concerned, the story of a man, a stranger in a strange land, is sort of missing. And in terms of, yes, Jake Sully is a white man. And of course, you also have Sigourney Weaver, who's been trying to learn about the natives and learn from them. It's not necessarily, everyone's so wrapped up in the idea of it being an allegory for indigenous peoples on this planet, but it's also a really interesting first contact story. And for me, that's how I've always looked at it, is that it was a very compelling story about and learning about an alien population. And yes, they're different from us, but the way that the planet is all, like it subscribes to the Gaia theory that we're all interconnected. And that's something that I've always thought was fascinating about the movie, because when I've been growing up as a kid, it was always apparent to me that this system, our closed system, Earth being a closed system, all of this stuff, we evolved together. Humanity evolved along with our biosphere. So everything that is in our biosphere has somehow affected us. The whole planet is part of this same, it's not an organism unto itself, although maybe it is, we just don't know that. But we tend to think of ourselves as apart from nature. And we talk about how, well, man has caused the extinction of species. We don't even know what the long-term ramifications of that are. If we are on this planet and all of the other animals that we inhabit the planet with have evolved along with us, we don't necessarily know how we're all interconnected. We don't have the science to really understand any of it. And I mean, we can understand how we all exist, but how are we connected to all of these different species? Are we? I mean, there's a lot of things that our science just doesn't know. And I really enjoyed the depiction of the fact that the Na'vi, they could literally plug into other animals and communicate with them on the planet. I thought this depiction of an alien civilization was fascinating. And sure, a lot of it, Cameron is making the point that, hey, we should be a little bit more mindful of our own planet. I mean, the idea that we just allow our oceans, for instance, basically the blood of our planet, to be polluted at all, considering so much of the food that comes from the ocean, our food supply. Like, think about it. Why would you want to ever pollute where our food comes from? But we do. Fertilizers in the soil, all of this unnatural material that we use to disrupt the flow of our planet. Let's kill the weeds with weed killer, Roundup. Well, what's that going to do in the long run? What does that do to us? Well, it's proven it causes cancer. And I think that with Avatar, it was, the messaging there might have been overt, but it was still fascinating. I was still very interested in what was going on with Pandora. I was fascinated about how the Na'vi were depicted, how they could, the whatever the Gaia, their spirit, Iwa, the god or the spirit that they worshipped, that they could actually interact with, and maybe we'll find out that along with the planet Solaris, that's from Stanislaw Lem's, the Polish science fiction writer's novel, Solaris the whole planet was alive and could communicate, and it had an interesting way of communicating. And of course, Cameron produced the remake, Steven Soderbergh's remake of Solaris, and I find all of the things that were touched on in Avatar to be fascinating, and I enjoyed every minute of watching it. Not only that, but the filmmaking on display is spectacular. And sure, it is an action-adventure story. It's a classical story that we've seen many tropes used before, but it was wildly entertaining. At least I found it wildly entertaining, and I found it completely immersive. And I found it sweeping and romantic and sad and thought-provoking. All of these things that I would have thought that anybody who's interested in science fiction, horror, and fantasy would have enjoyed, plus the powerhouse filmmaking of James Cameron. But unfortunately, that just isn't the case. And to this day, there are so many fans that just don't like Avatar. And I don't, I'm not begrudging them. You don't have to love Avatar. I'm not saying that, well, if you don't, you're some kind of an idiot, because I don't think that's true. But I am fascinated by all of it. I'm fascinated by how many people reject this film outright. And, I consider myself a fairly astute observer of these things. And I don't think that everybody has to enjoy what I enjoy, but I do find it fascinating that so many people tend to write this off or immediately poo-poo it, which is, it's not, it's just, I find it bizarre, to be honest. Sorry, I'm getting another article that I wanted to read about all this. And I don't know if I entirely understand it. I mean, obviously, somebody thought enough of James Cameron, and especially James Cameron himself likes Avatar. And to me, it's like, well, that should be good enough for me, because he's never failed us, as a filmmaker. And like we always say, don't ever bet against James Cameron. That way, if you do so, it's your own peril. And again, I just find that I'm hearing more about this, and obviously anybody who's been following the news, the Avatar 2 trailer dropped, and it was extraordinarily popular. It had more views than even Star Wars trailers did in the first 24 hours. And that I found to be kind of intriguing, kind of interesting. So anyway, I found this article. I started out and I typed in the Avatar backlash. And I wanted to see if anything came up about, well, what happened. And this article from the Daily Beast came up. And boy, this is going to be a flashback for all of you net denizens who've been online and gone to movie websites for a long time. So this article was published December 16th, 2009. So almost 13 years ago. It was written by Nicole Laporte. And you're going to hear from a lot of people in this one. If there were a place in the universe where James Cameron's long-awaited sci-fi epic Avatar should have been guaranteed to be embraced, it was at the Butt-Numb-a-thon last weekend. The annual film festival held in Austin, Texas, and sponsored by the Ultimate Movie Geek website, Ain't It Cool News. Remember Ain't It Cool News? Such a powerhouse, and it's almost an afterthought now. Ain't It Cool News is a fanboy's paradise. 24 hours of non-stop movies handpicked by Ain't It Cool News founder and geek extraordinaire Harry Knowles. This year's lineup included Martin Scorsese's upcoming Shutter Island, the 80s Hong Kong gross-out film Centipede Horror, and Avatar. Hey Gilbert. The 300 million-ish film, which Cameron has been working on for more than a decade and is his first since 1997's blockbuster of the century Titanic, was the festival's grand finale. And to say that the audience of 200 fans, most of whom have been diehard Cameronites since The Terminator, was excited is understating things. Walking out of the film in Austin, I can tell you I heard the correction. A ton of people were making Dances with Wolves comparisons and the fact that it's so cliched. I mean, rigorously cliched, said Jeremy Smith, West Coast editor of Ain't It Cool News. People were supremely disappointed. The term Dances with Wolves in space is also cropping up across the internet. Yet, what should have been an orgiastic love fest was, surprisingly, far more muted. During the film's visual piece de resistance, the final 45-minute War of the Worlds type action sequence, the applause was really half-hearted, said Jeremy Smith, West Coast editor at AICN. It was like, yes, we're into it, but we're not that into it. After the film, which tells the story of an Earthling who goes to a faraway planet to mine its natural resources and ends up falling in love with a native race of Na'vi creatures, Smith, a.k.a. Mr. Beaks, rushed to write his review. Not of Avatar, but Kick-Ass, an upcoming action movie directed by Matthew Vaughn of Layer Cake fame that played right before Avatar. I wrote my Kick-Ass review first because I had so much enthusiasm for that film. With Avatar, it was more like I was performing an autopsy. The lackluster reaction of geeks is the latest wildly dramatic pendulum swing in the reception of Avatar, a film that has been actively dissected and analyzed and loved and hated well before there was even any footage to judge. Now that film is finally being screened, it opens Friday, reactions are flooding in, and the results are defying expectation. The mainstream press, which for months had taken a cautious and vehemently skeptical stance toward a film that was touted as nothing short of a revolution for its technological breakthroughs, fell in love. Hard. 12 years after Titanic, which still stands as the all-time box office champ, Cameron delivers again with a film of universal appeal that just about everyone who ever goes to the movies will see, gushed Variety's Todd McCarthy. Just about everyone else felt equally jubilant. I can't even say that word. Even those who had previously weighed in as disbelievers. The same about face also happened with Titanic. Avatar's profile, not just as an extraordinary film, but a serious awards contender, was boosted further this week with the announcement of the Golden Globe nominations. The film is up for Best Picture and Director. Only 9 and Up in the Air racked up more total nominations. The Geeks, too, pulled a 180. After making snide swipes at Avatar After footage was presented at Comic-Con last summer, the Na'vi were Thunder Smurfs and were reminiscent of Jar Jar Binks, the highly ridiculed character from Star Wars. Fanboy pandemonium broke out over the internet last weekend. Okay, about Avatar, tweeted comingsoon.net. Wow, 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 wow. Unbelievable, amazing. James Cameron does it again. AICN's Hey Nick Cool News' C. Robert Cargill joined in, who went on to write things like Doctor Strange and The Black Phone, which is coming out, which is quite good. Robert Cargill joined in. So I just got home from the movie. It was pretty great. And if by pretty great, I mean, oh my fucking God, holy shit, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, because that's what it was. Yet the rapturous spell was broken in Austin, and according to Smith, a revisionist movement is now afoot among nerds, the center of the presumed sweet spot of the Avatar audience, and a powerful marketing tool for studios. There's this thing that happens when people are the first group in to see a movie. It is often judged to be better than it really is. There's a rush to judgment. Walking out of the film in Austin, I can tell you I heard the correction. A ton of people are making the Dances with Wolves comparison, and the fact that it's so cliched, and I mean rigorously cliched, people were supremely disappointed. The terms Dances with Wolves in space is also cropping up across the internet. Among the complaints from nerddom are the story of noble savages who show the ignorant, civilized man the virtues of living in, at according to, nature, has been done before. The dialogue is clunky, and while the CGI effects and mocap work is cool, it isn't as cool as they'd hoped. This isn't excuse me. This isn't Jurassic Park, said Devin Faraci, a writer and editor at Chud.com, a leading movie fan site. When I saw that movie, I said, oh my God, I've seen the next level. This isn't that. The nerds do, however, give it up for how real the Na'vi's eyes look, a challenge that other mocap filmmakers such as Robert Zemeckis, who made the Polar Express and A Christmas Carol, have yet to master. Fox and Cameron, of course, have gone out of their way to court the geek demo, counting on it to be the most vociferously impressed by Avatar's groundbreaking 3D and mocap technology and the meticulously designed fantasy world that Cameron designed down to every last micro creature. There was the Comic-Con presentation, followed by an Avatar day over the summer, when 20 minutes of the film was screened in IMAX theaters across the country. The Avatar video game was presented at E3, the annual Electronics Lollapalooza, and then, of course, there was the Butt-Numb-a-thon, where Cameron insisted the film play, overriding Fox, which has a contentious relationship with AICN. The site has been tough on Fox chairman Tom Rothman over the years, holding him responsible for destroying, as the geeks see it, comic book franchises such as X-Men and the Fantastic Four. Now, let me just chime in here before I read any more of this article. I have sort of a theory about this. You know, this movie isn't Avatar as cool as I think it is. I don't think the movie is very cool itself. The subject matter, while beautifully presented, I don't think is very edgy. It doesn't kick ass. I mean, sure, there's great battle scenes and the technology on display is cool. And I found the scene where Jake Sully finally could run after being crippled in the body of his avatar, trying to figure out how to work it, was a magical scene. And when they climb up the 70s prog rock album cover, Floating Mountains, to ride the dragons for the first time, that scene to me is some of the greatest fantasy filmmaking I've ever seen. But for the most part, this movie is, I mean, I guess if I was 8 years old, I might think to myself, you know, this movie's kind of for girls because of its romantic notions and sweeping classicism, and I mean classical storytelling. The color palette alone is hard to get used to because it is so bright and colorful. This movie is not cool. I think it's a cool movie, but it's not cool. It's not like when you see Bauhaus playing at the beginning of Tony Scott's The Hunger, and then you see David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve pick up a couple in this goth club. That's fucking cool and sexy and awesome. And I want to live in that world. I want to be a vampire. You know what? If I can only spend 300 years with Catherine Deneuve's Miriam Blaylock, like David Bowie did in The Hunger, and then I turn into a desiccated vampire that doesn't die that she'd put up in the attic, it would be worth those 300 years, let me tell you. Avatar isn't cool. And I really believe that the fan community, for all the complaints, they're looking for these complaints. I think Avatar is very transportive. I think it is very emotional. I find it's sweeping and romantic. All the things fandom really isn't that into. You know, I mean, we're still bitching, after all, about one shot of all the female superheroes in Endgame and calling it, you know, the MCU or whatever. I mean, I actually liked that shot. I thought it was pretty cool that for one brief moment during the battle, when the portals open and they're fighting Thanos' forces and all the heroes come out, there's one shot where all these female heroes wind up in a frame together, which I thought was cool. But if you think about it, I mean, how long were superheroics the purview of just dudes? You know, I mean, it was a very long time. I used to have this argument with Amy Dallin, who I work with on Collider Heroes. You know, I used to say to Amy, I said, you know, when I went to Comic-Con, when I first moved to LA in 1988, there weren't a lot of girls at Comic-Con. And there just weren't. And she would always say, oh, there's always been girls in fandom. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And they were filk singing at Star Trek conventions, writing slash fiction and all that. There were, but it wasn't mainstream. And it's become that way now. There's no schism in fandom at all. There's as many people into fandom now, into science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, video games, anime, whatever. There's almost the idea that you would have a delineation between gender or sex or whatever. No, it's enjoyed by everybody. We are the post-geek singularity. We're living in it. All of us, the whole world, are geeks. Everybody. We live in a geek world. And so those delineations are gone. But within the post-geek singularity, there are still, I think, a lot of people that, hey, we're still nerds, man. You know, you read about people are having less sex than they've ever had these days. I guess people don't think the opening of The Hunger is as cool as I do. But the world has changed. And yet, fandom still making fun of this movie. I don't know. Anyway, let me go on with this article. So, Devin Faraci, who was at the Austin screening, said, now, for those of you who just came in, remember the article I'm reading now from the Daily Beast was written in 2009. Faraci, who was at the Austin screening, said, I'd read all the glowing reviews by mainstream critics, and I said, wow, maybe this is going to be something that's actually really astonishing on a new level. It was not. Anyone who's seen a James Cameron movie knows what to expect. Sort of broad, extremely obvious, paper-thin characters who speak in ridiculous dialogue, terrific action, stunning visuals, and not a whole hell of a lot else, Faraci continued. There was nothing for me to grab onto emotionally in the whole picture. The problem, it seems, is that Avatar is proving to be a little too much like Titanic. A dramatic love story to fanboys is all about the sinking ship scene as opposed to the James Cameron films that geeks hold closest to their hearts, such as Terminator 1 and 2 and Aliens. In other words, there are no tricked-out, never-before-seen gadgets and non-stop fight scenes until the very end of the movie. Geeks can also do without the political and eco-commentary that are woven throughout Avatar, which amounts to a thinly veiled criticism of the United States' might makes right foreign policy. Analyzing the Button-Umathon debacle, Drew McWeeny, an editor at hitfix.com and formerly critic known as Moriarty at AICN, said, two things happened. Kick-Ass, which played directly before it, was a huge spike of adrenaline and wore the audience out. And Avatar was the first film in a 27-hour marathon. Avatar was the last film in a 27-hour marathon. So many people, no matter how excited, were slipping in and out of consciousness. Avatar's length, it is nearly 3 hours, added to the torturousness of the experience. Though McWeeny says he was one of the few who didn't mind. I like epics. My favorite film is Lawrence of Arabia. That's 3 hours and 20 minutes. Why would I complain? That article was written by Nicole Laporte, and at the time, 13 years ago, she was a West Coast reporter for the Daily Beast. She was a former film reporter for Variety and has also written for The New Yorker, The Los Angeles Times, The New York Times, The New York Observer, and W. I don't know what Nicole is doing now, but I would assume she's either still a journalist or maybe she's writing movies and TV right now herself. But I'll tell you, I mean, I thought going back and delving into the history of Avatar a little bit and thinking about the fan backlash. And I said to John on the show, I go, watch, after we saw the trailer at CinemaCon, which I thought was very impressive, especially in HFR and 3D, it just looked incredible. But once you remove that, the spectacle, you don't get the same visual jolt that you got when you see it presented that way. I said, when you just watch this, it basically doesn't show you much other than the fact that you're no longer in the forest, you're on the beach or you're on the water, which is a very different kind of an Avatar. But the water and everything, it's not that different. You're still in Pandora, you're still looking at the Na'vi, and we can see that there's some kind of there's a human presence there. There's still mining unobtainium, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. You see human kids fighting. What's going on there? We don't really know, and I'm curious to see how it all is going to play out. I mean, I don't know if did Jake Sully and Natiri have kids? I mean, can your avatar body that's half human and half Na'vi, can you procreate? Or maybe Iowa allows you to do that when you've been on the planet long enough. I don't know. But I'm very curious to go back and see, because seldom in movies do we have the kind of fully realized alien world that you have in Avatar. And that was, I mean, the whole portrayal of an alien ecosystem was fascinating. And the design of the creatures and everything else. And it looks like the design of the sea life, and with James Cameron's predilection for diving and going into the oceans for real. It's really interesting. I mean, I can't wait to see this movie. I can't wait to see what he's doing. And I can't wait to see how he's going to push the boundaries of technology in this movie. How they're going to do it, I don't know. But I know one thing. It's going to kick ass, as it always does. James Cameron movies always kick ass. I mean, if nothing else, it's going to look amazing. I mean, and I think it's going to be very, 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 very cool. I hope that, in the intervening years, that James Cameron, and I'm sure this will be the case, has come up with some really interesting commentary about where we're at now. I mean, I would hope so. I mean, that's kind of absolutely what I'm hoping to get out of this. And I think what we're going to get is really interesting, or going to be really interesting. At least that's what I would hope. I mean, it is, after all, James Cameron. And if there's one thing I've learned in my life, you don't bet against James Cameron. Like, ever. You never do. Why would you? I don't know. Let's see what you guys have to say. A lot of people have been sending in super chats and things, and let's just jump into them. I haven't been here for a while. Let's see. Hitchcock is the GOAT sends in a super chat and says, I liked Avatar, and I don't doubt Cameron. I'm sure it will be a huge success. It's just not getting my support until I can get a 4K disc of The Abyss, extended, of course, and True Lies. There's simply no excuse at this point. I'd settle for digital. Well, what Hitchcock is referring to, James Cameron's company Lightstorm, there are 4 movies that are unavailable in high def in any form on physical media. The movies have turned up streaming, but you cannot get The Abyss. It's only ever been released on DVD, believe it or not. I mean, it was released on Laserdisc and tape as well, but you in the modern era, you cannot get The Abyss. I have The Abyss DVD, and it's got the great documentary Under Pressure on it, which I bet they won't even let him release probably when they re-release it, if they ever do. True Lies, the Arnold Schwarzenegger action comedy with Tom Arnold and Jamie Lee Curtis, is not available in HD on disc. It's streaming. I've got a rip of it from Spain. Also, Catherine Bigelow's a movie that I deeply love, Strange Days. I have the German Blu-ray. No, Dieter Bastian didn't get it for me. I had it before I met him. And then there's the disc that he did get for me, Steven Soderbergh's remake of Solaris. Also not available on disc in HD in the United States. And I want all 4 of those movies in 4K. So why you can't get them, I don't know. But, I wouldn't boycott any movie because I'm waiting to get, something else. I wouldn't do that. I'm still going to go see it. But I understand. Hitchcock's the GOAT. You and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I want those discs. Nick Barkins says, hello, Rob. So James Cameron's movies often show us special effects we've never seen before. Terminator, the T-1000, CGI, Avatar motion capture, and now underwater motion capture. How do you think he does this? Well, I think that, James Cameron is a technologist as well as a filmmaker. And, he thinks things up. He's very similar to Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick, when he wanted to shoot Barry Lyndon, he had to figure out how could he shoot in candlelight. I mean, he got NASA lenses and adapted cameras to shoot with them. And I think James Cameron's kind of the same way. He thinks about the technology, what's available, what he wants to do. And if it's not available, he'll go make it. His brother will design something and they'll do it. And I really think that's great. And, he's been doing the R&D for Hollywood for a very long time. And I think it's great. Superhero displays. I think I might put my Gladiator Thor up on my desk in the John Campea show. I have a theory on this whole Avatar hate. I've noticed a trend when costly big movies make waves. The so-called film buffs scoff as they feel that's what they're supposed to do. In other words, La La Land versus Moonlight, real film buffs aren't allowed to have it all. I think you're right. I mean, I see it a little bit like, when you loved your favorite band in high school. I remember when The Cure, I was actually in college, but when The Cure's Disintegration came out, which is pretty commercial record. Now, I loved The Cure. Or Depeche Mode, same thing. British bands I loved. Well, when they had a big breakthrough album in America, there's like, oh, these bands sold out. They want to be commercial. I never understood that thinking. I'm like, if your favorite band put out a record, that in itself is commercial. If they're selling their music to you in any medium, of course they want to get successful. If your band that you love, they're playing music, they're doing what they love, don't you want them to make money at it? I mean, I would. But a lot of people don't. But yeah, it's kind of wacky. Our friend Cal, Swag Props, is here. Cal says, uh-oh. The dogs are here. There. Can't knock things around. That's my UFO lunchbox, Tallulah. Swag Prop says, the only reason I'm looking forward to Avatar 2 is to check out the new 3D technology Cameron's been developing that doesn't require the viewers to use glasses. Well, we did have to use glasses when we watched the trailer at CinemaCon. We had to watch the trailer with glasses on. The 3D was great, but we did have to use glasses. I don't know, Cal, if we are going to see glasses free 3D. I don't know if that's the case. Nick Markins sends me a super chat and says, Rob, I sent you this question before, but I can't remember if you got it. But did you hear there's going to be a remake of Fritz Lang's Metropolis on Apple TV? I did hear something about that. I don't know much about it other than the fact I heard they were going to do it. I don't know if they will or not. But if they are, I hope it's good. I mean, obviously, I love Metropolis. I think it's one of my favorite science fiction films ever. And it's still striking. I've got like 3 different versions of it on physical media, including the 80s Giorgio Moroder version, which I still dig. But it's great. Cincinnati's 5-star barber. I love when I see you around these parts, sir, because, I mean, obviously I'm a Seahawks fan, but I do love Ray Ora's love of your team. And it's good to see you here. Cincinnati's 5-star barber says, it amazes me how one of my top 5 favorite and beloved films of all time gets so much hate. Going to Pandora at Disney made me fall back in love with it, and I pulled my Hot Toys Jake Sully back out again. Avatar is a classic. Love it. It is. I think so. I think so too. I had my Jake Sully ripped off recently. I'll have to go back and get it. Hitchcock is the GOAT says, I love your Empire Strikes Back poster. I have the exact same one in my man cave. I bet you don't have the exact same one because this poster is this was called a 40 by 30 by 40. Movie posters used to be 27 inches by 41 inches, and that included the white border. But then these were on heavy cardstock They were 30 inches by 40 inches. It was kind of an odd size, but that is an original Empire Strikes Back release poster. I like it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm going to put it up here somewhere. Gilbert, please stop barking. But I love your Empire Strikes Back poster. I have the exact same one in my man cave, along with Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Inception. Hitchcock is my GOAT, but Christopher Nolan is my favorite active filmmaker. Love the show. Well, thank you. Did you get the new 4K box of Hitchcock movies that came out this week? I haven't got mine yet, or maybe it came today. I didn't look, but I hope it did. Lewis Barry says, Avatar 2 trailer looks awesome, showing us the world and experience we loved from before with better visuals without showing too much. Can't wait. I can't wait either. I mean, and it looks really interesting from what they showed. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see where they go with it. Gilbert, please come in here. Gilbert, please report to me. Simon sends in a tip and says, it's crazy how Paramount sent an email survey invite over Picard Season 2 to share my thoughts about it. And that includes a $100 sweepstakes drawing. But after answering what my favorite TV shows and movies are, I was disqualified. Good, I'm not a shill. Look, man, Akiva Goldsman, Academy Award-winning Akiva Goldsman, blocked me on Twitter. I'm like, okay, I mean, you can. I understand why. But, I mean, you're working on Star Trek. You're making tons of money. It's like, okay, block people that are critical of your work. It's really interesting. You know what I would say? Star Trek needs to be better. I know everyone's in love with Strange New Worlds, but that will wear off when the show continues. I mean, people are so desperate to see. I do not think it's an epic win that they're trying to make Star Trek the way it was made 56 years ago. I mean, I said once, I wrote on Tumblr, the only Tumblr post I think I ever made, when I heard that Discovery was going to get made. I think I did this like 5 years ago. I explained that I think that they should embrace new serialized storytelling. The problem with Star Trek is the people that are writing it don't know anything about science fiction. They don't know how to do any kind of credible world building, which is so weird because the world was built for them. There's countless books and reference material. I mean, if I was jumping into Star Trek, if I didn't know anything about Star Trek, I would immerse myself in it. And it's really interesting. That's what Nicholas Meyer did before he made Star Trek 2. That's what Eric Jedrinson did when he wrote Star Trek The Beginning, which I think should still get made. It takes place 8 years after Enterprise, and it was about the Romulan War. But yeah, and so Simon, they don't want anyone who knows anything about Star Trek. Dieter Bastian, hello, friend. We are going to do a show this Sunday. Dieter Bastian says, for me, it's about the execution. The stories get recycled is nothing new. I watched it last weekend after seeing the trailer for 2. It still holds up. It does. It's an incredible film. I think Avatar is an incredible movie. Jeff Bingham sends in a tip and says, what are your thoughts on the Fatal Attraction series being planned for Paramount Plus, considering you've questioned whether that premise could work today? You know, I mean, Tallulah, how did you? She has her muzzle on. I don't like it when your mom puts a muzzle on you. You take this off. You don't have to have a muzzle on in here. That's terrible. Tallulah barks a lot. You know, why make a Fatal Attraction TV series? It's like, okay, it's such a weird thing. They can't come up. Somebody should make a modern erotic thriller. I would like to see that. I mean, Adrian Lyne's Deep Water, it was interesting to see him come back. I mean, Ana de Armas is sexy as hell in that movie, but that movie was actually it was not fun to watch because Ben Affleck, to use a word, was such a cuck. And I know it was based on a Patricia Highsmith novel, but it wasn't fun. I wasn't having fun watching that movie. But, you know, whatever. Look, I just want things are going to be good. Give me things that are good. Well written, stories well told. So we'll see. Jeff Bingham, you and I will watch it, and you'll report back to me because I hope it's good. Kinky's Finkter says, I can't wait for Event Horizon on 4K. It's going to look awesome on OLED. Yes, it will look awesome on OLED. I like, it's not a perfect movie, but there's the Event Horizon. I like it. I like Event Horizon. It's not great, but I do like the fact that some ship went to hell. No, Gilbert, come back here. No. Wait, Tallulah, don't. You've got my, there. She was going to run away with my cord to my and then Wee Woo, our new puppy, Sebastian. He was here too. I got the whole group. So yeah, I mean, I like Event Horizon. It's not the greatest movie in the world, but I like it. I like the cast. I like what's going on. It just doesn't go far enough. I mean, everyone's talking about, they had real porn stars and they'd film these apparently hellish scenes, and all that footage got lost. So we only get a little glimpse of it in the finished film, and they've been looking for it, but they can't find it. So Cincinnati's 5-star barber sent in a super chat and says, by the way, Rob, Zevia, Zevia is how I pronounce it. I don't know if it's not Zevia, it's Zevia, which I love, and I'm drinking it right now. Released orange cream and fruit punch as limited releases. Had to order both. I'm almost as excited for them as I am for The Way of Water. Orange cream and fruit punch. I wonder. Do you hear my dogs? Hang on one second. Let me yell at them. Hang on. Hey, Tallulah, Gilbert, Tallulah, come in here. Gilbert, come here. Gilbert. Well, there you go. I hope I muted that before I screamed. But yeah, I will check those out. I don't know why they're barking. See, there's creatures in our backyard. And as you can tell, the dogs are barking at the creatures. Tallulah, Gilbert, you want a treat? You guys want a treat? Oh, they can't hear me. Comics Exposed says, Rob, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was a horrible movie and focused very little on Strange. Wasn't even the hero of his own movie. You think Disney will continue this trend? Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I thought that him and Wong kind of were the heroes of the movie, and it was an interesting odyssey. I thought it was a minor Marvel movie, but a minor MCU movie, but I liked it as a Doctor Strange movie. Wow, these dogs are going crazy. I don't know what they see out there, but they're going crazy. And there's lots of creatures out there. Hold on one more time. Let me see if I can get them to stop. These crazy dogs. But I liked it. I liked Doctor Strange. I didn't think it was perfect, but I liked it. I certainly enjoyed it. But I understand. I understand why a lot of people didn't like it. But I really enjoyed the Sam Raimi-ness of it, and I really liked everything that was in it. I think I'm going to have to cut this short and go find out why these dogs are barking like they are. Tom Jr. Jackson says, Rob, were you surprised between Friday and Monday Doctor Strange 2 made $200 million? I actually was not, because the audience I saw with liked it. People dug it. And I really have to go get these dogs because they're barking at the neighbors and it's late. But I was not surprised. Sorry. Claudius, our friend Claudius is here. Hello. Bonjour, Robert. Pronounced Robert. Why didn't Raimi watch all of WandaVision? Why didn't Kurtzman's creative team watch Star Trek? You know what? I think, remember, Raimi is handcuffed by what they want him to do with the MCU. But are you guys going to come in here? Gilbert, come here. Sebastian, come in here. I don't know if we're ever going to get the things that we want out of life, like getting my dogs to shut up right now and whatever they're barking at. Last time they were barking at something, there was a giant possum that I couldn't believe. But I'll be the one. Send in a super chat. Well, thank you. I'll be the one. That was very nice of you. Very nice of you to send me that super chat. God damn it. Bastards. Now Elizabeth is yelling at the dogs too. Simon says, my thoughts about how Picard season 2 could have been better would have been to have had Admiral sheer fucking hubris to return and create scenes where Admiral and Picard would have had dialogue. Every time they meet, Picard is told sheer fucking hubris by the Admiral. Do you know that that's Anne Magnuson, who is actually in the opening scene of The Hunger? That's who that actress is. Listen, everybody, I'm going to have to go cut this chat short and find out what the dogs are doing and who and what are they barking at, because everyone is going crazy and I must stop them from doing this. And they're teaching our little puppy, Sebastian, wrong behavior. Oh, Elizabeth has come. Elizabeth has come to get them. So maybe I can continue. But, you know, I hated Picard season 2. I hated everything about it. I thought it was nonsensical. It didn't make sense. I'm still wondering why. Why did anybody go back in time? Like, why did Q create this scenario in the first place? What has Alison Pill been doing for 400 years as the Borg Queen? Like, she couldn't have prevented the Battle of Wolf 359? How many people did the Borg assimilate in 400 years? How many people caught hell? And you're supposed to just believe that she shows up 400 years later. Hey, you got to help. We got to work. There's a spatial anomaly that we have to fix. Nothing made any sense in Picard season 2. None of it. Hated it. Hated it. Hated it. Anyway, well, Mythosaur Killa says your brother's dog went crazy one night. Someone was trying to break in. I'm outside, so you never know. So there you go. But anyway, everyone, I'm going to bring this chat to an end, and I want to thank everybody for being here. It's great, and I want to thank everybody who popped in for just a minute, and I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson and Alex Detman. And Mike Bodden. Mike Bodden was here. He says, "Happy Twilight Zone Day, Rob." Today was officially Twilight Zone Day, which I did not know. Mike told me that. If you don't listen to our little podcast in Road Tripping with Rob, Mike and I do a podcast every morning when I drive to the John Campea show, where we ruminate on various subjects, and it's a lot of fun. So check that out. It's wherever you get your podcasts. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. And I'm going to be reading letters again. I don't have any letters to read. I'm sure people have sent them in. I just don't have them to read. I will read letters from you. You can go to postgeeksingularity.com. You can send me letters, and I will read them live on the show. And on that note, I would say to all of you, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say, have a better night. By the way, this is Robservations episode number 799. I have tried to get something. I'm doing something a little different for the 800th show, and I'm going to let that be a surprise, but it's not going to be an 800-minute show. I don't have a bunch of celebrity interviews. It's going to be a much smaller affair, but it's certainly going to be interesting. And it's not necessarily, it's movie related, but I think it has a little bit more import than I've ever had before on any of these shows. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you will be with me. And you'll see Robservations start to ramp up again. And, of course, the John Campea Show and the Designing Hollywood podcast and all those things. So I hope you'll stay with me for all of it. And on that note, I would say, have a good evening.